on their social media accounts that it is there and gives them a couple of minutes to kind of chime in. So, and you said your week got away from you. How's your week been? Both of you.
Oh my gosh, I'm very lucky since I'm very old. I can't remember how it's been other than it was pretty bouncy and kind of all over the place. But Chiezan, you can say how your life was because you remember everything. So
yeah, great.
So, all right. Well, we're just going to go ahead and jump right in, and hopefully folks will come on. And if any of you are listening yet, you can always ask questions on Facebook or I think YouTube as well. But my guests today are Sokuzan and Chiezan. Sokuzan is the abbot of the, so I should have asked this one too, SokukoJi?
Yeah, close. SokukoJi, yes.
SokukoJi Buddhist Monastery Temple right here in Battle Creek. He's a Battle Creek native, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And I picked up this term, and I don't know any of these terms, so you'll forgive me if I say anything wrong, but he's the prior or chief priest. And I picked up protege of you, Sokuzan. That's probably not the right word, but Chiezan is a kind of new in Battle Creek, moved here. So he'll talk a little bit about that too. Mm-hmm. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you so much.
I'm very pleased to have you. And I got to know Chiezan a few months ago, I think, talking about some programming that you've been doing here at the library. And we had a terrific conversation about community and, thinking about how we can wrap our arms around the community. And, Battle Creek has its challenges, but it's a beautiful place. And so carried that with me all this time. So why don't we just start talking, tell us a little bit about yourself for those who haven't heard or haven't seen you before. And Sokuzan, we'll let you go first. Age before beauty, right?
Absolutely. Good idea. So my Dharma name, the name I was ordained with as a Buddhist monk, is Sokuzan, which means as it is, a mountain, or this mountain. So it comes from my preceptor was Kuzan Shoho Mike Newhall, who lives out in California. Our relationship goes way back to when we both went to the Art Institute of Chicago in the early 60s, right after I got out of 4 years in the Marine Corps. So I've gone a lot of different directions, studying art, trying to get some discipline or some stability through the military training that I went through many years ago, and still continuing to look for a way of training my mind so that I could be more, you could say, to use the common word, more sane, less spinning around and looking in all the wrong places, as you might say, or could be said. So beyond that, there's a lot of autobiographical stuff that I can go into if there are questions.
Well, I think maybe just how you got on this path. I think it's fascinating. You've told it before. I've seen it in the paper before, but again, not everybody has heard it. And when we got to know each other last week, you talked about your youth and about how you were like, you had some anger issues, and
yes,
Marine Corps seemed like a great move at the time. But why don't you take it from there?
Well, they act in the Marine Corps. Of course, it's a different modality and a different understanding of what human beings are all about. So it's not a spiritual path. It is a mundane path of been around for forever. In ancient India, 2,500 years ago, at the time of the Buddha, the one who began this particular non-theistic lineage of spiritual path, Kshatriyas were warriors. There was an actual caste. The word caste is not exactly correct, but it's something it was, I think, the Portuguese, when they came there, decided to use that structure. So looking for some kind of way of controlling, working with the anger. It didn't work so well in the Marine Corps, tended to make it a little bit worse, but put it to use, I guess you could say, in some ways, of being a fighter. Yeah. So then and kept reading books on Buddhism and psychology, and also philosophy, going lots of different directions. Early books on Buddhism were available. Then in 1973, I ran into the book by my teacher, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, and that turned everything around. I began to practice meditation under his guidance, and it just kind of kept on going for the next 50 years or so.
Wow.
So here we are.
Yeah. Chiezan?
I started practicing Buddhism with Sokuzan about 13 years ago. I was in college in Grand Rapids and moved down here to study with him daily for the last 11 years. I've been living here at the monastery and studying with him and watching this evolve. And as you know, it's drawn in a lot of people. I think there's somewhere around 15 residents that have moved from all over the country and state to practice and study Buddhism with Sokuzan. And we're slowly branching out into the community through the Karma House Wellness Center. And as you were mentioning, our programming with the youth at the library, just using mindfulness, meditation, yoga, traditional therapy. We have a social worker, Kelly Climby, that comes in with us to just give some tools to our local teens.
Yeah. So I was a little bit off by calling you a newbie. I think 11 years counts you as a little bit more than a newbie. Although I've been here 24 years, and I'm getting to local status. I don't know, but so why don't we talk a little? Because I don't want to leave anything out, but we can talk about so much. But I thought I would put up some slides. We just talk a little bit about what's there, and I put this up first because you had mentioned the book just now, Sokuzo. We do have this in the collection at the library, and this was an anniversary, I think, that I saw on your Instagram account, April 4th. Or am I mixing things up?
Go ahead.
Are you referring to the photo there?
Yes.
So April 4th, I believe, was the date that your teacher passed. In 1987.
He did. After being in the West since 1970, he came from England. First, he left Tibet in the early 60s, and then showed up in several places in India, and then eventually came to England. And then after that, in the 1970s, he had several students in the United States, so he came here to study. This is a very powerful book. We still study this same book in the monastery, I think once a week right now, going through it over and over again. And that's a picture of him in the center. The anniversary was at 36. How many years? 36 years since his passing. And so we're just not so much celebrating, but acknowledging that and memorializing the fact that he had passed away into what's in Buddhism is called parinirvana.
Right. And this was one of you mentioned a book that you read before, but this was still pretty early. Is this a book that someone who's just curious can pick up and really?
Yes, Michael. I highly recommend this book. If it may turn you towards Buddhism, it may turn you away from Buddhism, but it is really a no-nonsense book. And for someone who is intellectual or not so intellectual, it's very straightforward. Sometimes what I would say to someone, you might have to read it a few times. You might have to read the first chapter called the introduction. You might have to read that a few times. You might have to read the first chapter, which is called Spiritual Materialism, several times, because the conceptual, the construct in here, the language in here is, even though Trungpa Rinpoche, which is his title, Rinpoche means the precious one, and it's a commonly used title for those in Tibet who are teachers. Mm-hmm. And he was very, very adept at using the English language to teach what the Buddha taught 2,500 years ago in a more common parlance, I guess you would say.
Sure. Well, after you mentioned, I was very glad to find out that we have a copy both downtown at Willard and out of the branch. So it's a great place for people to start. And we have a great collection, thanks to our director, Matt, who you knew very well, Matt.
I do.
So yeah, let's just go ahead and go to the next slide. And I actually, what you just said, I did want to reminded me of, you say again and again, and it's on your website as well, that not everybody who comes to meditate or take part of in the services are necessarily Buddhists. Is that correct?
That's true.
Yeah.
And you can study Buddhism without ever becoming formally a Buddhist.
Sure.
You could study Buddhism and still be any other spiritual or religious affiliation, including no particular track there at all, because it's very supportive to someone looking deeply into their consciousness to find out more about their identity and the identity of those around them.
Right. So, and I just kind of wanted to show folks, oops, my technology is a little jumpy tonight, so I apologize for that. But this is the monastery entrance itself, I take it.
Right.
Yes, we are we are tucked back on Anderson Court, and even our neighbors don't know that we exist. Even with that big gate out front, a Tory gate, yeah, not a lot of people know we're there. It's pretty quiet, and that's the front entrance. That's what you would see coming into the monastery.
Yeah. Well, it is a little bit of an oasis, I'd say. I mean, it is tucked away. And I guess people can be forgiven for not necessarily knowing that it's there, although more and more visible. And this was the recent addition. And of course, I have he's 24 now, but I have a son that I used to go to Meyer Tour World quite a bit. And this is the Karma House. And talk a little bit about that, Chiezan.
Karma House developed out of Sokuzan's inspiration to connect with the community. And something in relating to the community that we try to emphasize is it's really intended to be a secular outreach, that it is not intended to funnel anybody or convert anybody. It very much is using traditional modalities and contemporary modalities to work with people. My wife operates a business out of there of a collection of 4 social workers, just traditional talk therapy. Mm-hmm. We're offering yoga on a weekly basis, as well as a movement class on Saturday mornings. We do have a lot of free and donation-based classes, and there's just a really strong inspiration that maybe Sokuzan could say something about, in particular with working with Battle Creek youth, particularly because we're literally across the street from the high school, as you know.
Right. Yeah, please, Sokuzan.
Yeah, so in 1959, which, and this was in the last century, 1959, and I graduated from high school there, and I didn't have any options, any other way of working with my anger, my immaturity at 18 years old, and so I went in the military because I knew I needed some kind of structure or form. I'm not against the military. I think we need that in different ways, at different times, very situational. But it would have been great if I could have walked out of there and walked 3 blocks and come into Karma House or come into the monastery complex and met people who were meditators and who would have helped me possibly train my mind. But that wasn't there. So I've been inspired for quite a while to try to create a place where those young people walking out of the high school might have another option. We don't really advertise or promote anything, nor do we guarantee anything, but it's available. So we feel that it's time for people to come this way, they will. But there's no particular promotion of it other than, well, we do some outreach at the library that you could talk about a little bit. We have yoga. You could come in and practice yoga here for a year and possibly not even realize there's a Buddhist monastery 60 feet away from you, right next door in the same building complex. Four different houses in that area.
Well, so, I think this is a good time. The tenets of your monastery, the 3 C's.
So these are the primary ones. That are very simple. 3 C's is basically communication is the first one. It says community, but that could go on the tail end.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
That's right. No, that's all right. So communication, in other words, and when I say communication, I'm saying receiving, listen to everyone. Sometimes if people are having trouble in their relationship with anyone, with a partner or a friend or a parent or a child, is switch it around so you listen 90% of the time and talk 10. That's the communication. Then there's cooperation. Cooperation will not happen unless the communication is really, really intense. And so communication, cooperation, collaboration. And then the collaboration will come about if the first one is really, working, you could say there is some kind of a structure there that where you actually are receiving what is being said. And then, of course, collaboration. And then we actually have 3 other tenets, which we need to bring those up here. That if you got involved in the meditation part of the more deeply into that, then there are also tenets that go more into the psychology, philosophy, and practice of the Buddhist path down through the centuries.
In my and this is a good time for me. I went out on a limb and I'm promoting this, and I said what I've come to see self-love really mean, and that being that it's a communal act.
Yes,
and I picked up a little that there might be a tension point among practitioners about individual versus community. Did I get that wrong, or does that make sense?
well, it does. I can say a couple of words about it. There's always going to be tension.
Sure.
We're not trying to get rid of tension.
Yeah.
We're trying to understand what the source of that is, or how that actually works. You can speak to that, community.
It's hard.
Yeah.
Living in community can be difficult, but it provides you an opportunity to look at things that you could otherwise hide out from. So you can leave your coworkers at home, or when you go home, and you can leave your family when you leave Easter dinner or Christmas dinner. But when you're constantly immersed in community, you really have to begin to take responsibility for that negativity. That being said, there's also a tremendous draw. I think people are lacking community, and that's part of why so many people have been magnetized to a community where it's not about adhering to doctrine or dogma, but a group of people supporting one another. The majority of our residents are quite young, actually, most of them in their 30s. So I think particularly generationally, we're seeing a lot of people feeling a lack of community, and so drawn towards not only Sokuzan's teaching, but a living situation that's very intentional and is supportive and also respectful of the individuality and the individual sanity and insanity that each one of us experiences.
Sure. Yeah. It just occurred to me that, when after our conversation, actually, or after our conversation too, Chiezan, and then, of course, I did a little reading after the 3 of us spoke, but that, self-love, which, and please correct me if I'm like overstating anything, but that to me seems like a lot of the core of what we often talk about is maybe that love's not the right word, but really being present in yourself and accepting yourself, which I think is a version of love. Sometimes self-love is misunderstood to be selfish or an individualistic kind of thing. That's a question or a rhetorical statement, either one.
You can address that.
I think there is a type of taking care of oneself that is important, and what perhaps is most challenged in a path like this of training the mind is that you actually take care of yourself by getting to know those difficult qualities instead of spending your life trying to get rid of them. And that can be difficult to begin to take responsibility for the negativity we have and not simultaneously beat ourselves down for having this anger, this greed, this jealousy. So making friends with oneself, that's a teaching Sokuzan has given many times, is a little bit more radical, you could say, in this path, in the sense of we're not trying to fix the negativity, but actually be willing to have space for that and be able to continue to function in the midst of our negativity while simultaneously not being fueled by our negativity. So the anger may be there, but we don't necessarily have to act out of that anger. And it is something I know for myself I continue to practice with even after the last 13 years of meditating on a daily basis.
I want to talk a little bit about meditation too, but let's go ahead and the asparagus house. And what is this house for? This faces on. It's right next to Karma House, right?
It is. Yes, it's a building that was probably built. I don't know. Do we know the date of that? 1875.
Late 1800s.
It's beautiful. We've remodeled or restored a lot of this old building, and looks pretty good, not only outside but inside. And So the idea of naming, I name everything. If you were to look at a map showing all the buildings, I not only name monks and people and lay practitioners, give them different names, give them Dharma names, like Chiezan means wisdom and compassion mountain, and so then I also name buildings, and I don't really always know exactly where the name comes from. Just like Karma House is action house, and it's named in that way. The upstairs is called Cloud Palace, and I'm not sure how that arose. It just I looked at it and that arose, and it's not something ethereal or magical. It just seems to arise. And Asparagus House arose. I'm not sure what it was. It's not. I mean, I like asparagus. It's good, tasty.
It seemed like it fit to me, but I guess I did maybe think there was some, asparagus somewhere on the wall.
Well, I'm sure there's a story. There's some kind of a story there, but Michael, I'd have to just make it up right now.
And that's okay. That's okay.
Well, once there was a piece of asparagus walking by. Yeah.
So,
go ahead, please.
No, I just want to. I guess some of the bigger questions that you have, a soundbite to answer. But no, what is Buddhism? And folks, he might answer my question with a question to me, and I'll be stumped, but that's okay.
So the word Buddhism or Buddha Dharma means awaken. Buddha means awake, and so what did the Buddha awake to? He awoke to the truth of his own identity and the identity of others. He saw that nothing was separate from anything else. It just looks that way. So that is the illusion that Buddhist practitioners eventually awaken to, that everything is an illusion. It is fundamentally unreal, but you still have to work with it. So you still work with it. You're still embodied. You're still a physical form, but your understanding of your deeper level of your understanding or yourself would be that kind of understanding. So you have what the Buddha awoke to is that nothing is separate from anything else, and when it looks like it's separated into right and wrong, up and down, back and forth, sacred and profane, etc., 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 that is called delusion. You're deluded about the nature of this. But if you see what this is, the delusion is still there, but it is recognized as an illusion that is unreal. That what you're looking at is illusory. That its apparent solidity or presence or manifestation is untrue. And what is true? It's seeing what that is. If you see what that is, that's awakening. This is called Buddhahood, and it's and a person may awaken to what the Buddha saw, and they may not. There's no guarantee. You can practice your whole life and still never awaken. But in the Buddha's Dharma, we aren't just limited to this lifetime. Does this mean we have future lifetimes or past lifetimes? Not necessarily, but something is going on in consciousness that is not restricted to just this physical presence. So it goes beyond that, would be another way of saying it. And so Buddhism is a non-theistic path that lots of people have interpreted in different ways. There's lots of different lineages. Even our lineage is called the Order of Immediate Light. It's under the Soto Shu in Japan. That's where it came. But then I also have a Tibetan teacher, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. Rinpoche, as I said, means precious one or precious teacher. So this is kind of a hybrid, right, in this small monastery, which we are endeavoring to train people who give us permission to train them.
I wanted to ask both of you, and I'll start with you, Sokuzan. Do you remember the point at which, or maybe it doesn't work like that? Maybe it's a slow.
Ask me.
Yeah. Well, my question is, when did it click? When
click. The idea of a click is the very nature of relative truth. We think something clicks.
Yeah.
And this path transcends relativity without abandoning it. So ultimate truth and relative truth, not two different things, nor are they the same. That's why it's a spiritual path where you actually transcend the what is called in the Heart Sutra, the walls of the mind. You actually see the wall and you transcend it more.
Yeah. I think, maybe, and click was the wrong word, but just kind of like how it felt, an awakening, a sense.
Felt good.
No.
Felt good, Michael.
I'll keep trying. What about you, Chiezan?
Go ahead.
What's the question again?
No, really, when it, I mean,
That's a question.
you had talked about in your own, and what I've read from you, Sokuzan, before about you had read a book earlier, but it was when you read the book we put up, you know, that
Yes.
something just really like became clear to you.
Something in 1960, when I was in the Marine Corps, I read a book called Zen Flesh, Zen Bones by Paul Reps. It's still available. And there was a series of mondo or stories or koans that were quite provocative. You read it, doesn't make any sense, but it does something with your mind that takes it away from its attachment to relative truth and begins the path to ultimate understanding. So to ego, it's very provocative and can be a little scary or annoying. So you might think, who needs this? But if to someone who has a little bit of an openness in that area, it tweaks your curiosity, understanding. So then you continue. And once that happened to me, I I never stopped it. It was 12 years later, reading lots of books before I met my, I would say it this way, my guru or my teacher. Yeah. Guru is just Sanskrit for teacher.
Right. Chiezan?
I guess for me, I felt pretty empowered by just this idea of seeing for myself that I think most of us come to Buddhism out of some sort of suffering. There's a lot of difficulty, and most of us have tried every modality we can get our hands on. Buddhism is almost like a last resort for most people. So what I found difficult is that if you go to somebody who prescribes medication, that's all they do. Well, if we just get the medication right, or if you just do the right exercise, if you just eat the right diet. So everyone's so convinced that if you just do their program correctly, you'll feel better. And Buddhism, and particularly in studying with Sokuzan, there just wasn't that guarantee, but it was constantly returning to my own intelligence. And that was frightening because we just want someone to tell us what to do most of the time. And because you're having to see for yourself, no one's quite able to say, yep, that's it, you got it. But I felt really empowered that perhaps there was an opportunity for me to sit down through the practice of meditation and begin to see more clearly what it was I was trying to get rid of or to escape from. And as Sokuzan said, the initial idealism was that I would find the path away from my negativity. And it's becoming more and more clear that in actuality that I can live a kind life in the midst of whatever my mind may be producing moment to moment.
Yeah. I my battery is low. Give me 1 second. There's a precedent for this, that my laptop died one time. So we don't want that to happen.
Oh, talk amongst yourselves. Look at that. Look at those cars behind you.
Isn't that a great photo? I love those old photos.
Wonderful. Yeah.
So, we're up to a half an hour and there's no time limit or anything, but I do want to make sure that we have time to talk a little bit about, because I could ask you tons of questions. I have lots of questions. But your vision for the monastery, and you've already talked a little bit about it, but I got really excited when Chiezan reached out about the possibility of doing programming. And of course, I referred him to our children's services team, who are fantastic. But the idea of like understanding that we live, particularly in this part of town, but it's everywhere. I mean, it comes all walks of life and all strata, but there's a lot of suffering and a lot of people needing community, I think. At least it's always been my sense. And how does the monastery fit into that?
Well, the vision always changes. It's not something that's locked down, but basically the idea is the main vow of the Mahayana path, or the path in which we're working with coming down from the Buddha, is the open way. And the main practice in there is that of the Bodhisattva, or the enlightening being, or the one who is on the path to understand what the Buddha taught. And one of the things that the vow that person takes, which we've taken, and other people, monks and lay practitioners, have received that formally, sometimes have a name change when that happens. I give them a different name. And that encourages people to put others before themselves, no matter what. And that doesn't mean that you have to go the other way and go without eating or without clothing or without money, but try as much as you can situationally to put others before yourself, help people when they're in trouble, but always do it with their permission rather than help them based on your idea of what they need. So this is why it's so important for the CCC. First, really listen to the person, talk to them, ask questions, and listen to what is happening there. And then as far as the rest of the vision is to basically do it right here where we're at, right in the center of Battle Creek, right in Myers Story World, and right in the place that used to be a VFW hall that was once down the street a ways and was actually moved, and now it's a big old brick building where our temple actually is. And so the idea is just to extend out using others like you, for us to, you come this way and we come that way. So we do this. It's a very much communication, cooperation, collaboration, and we do this together. I'm not like a teacher that kind of just tells people what to do. I do some of that, but only if absolutely necessary. Usually if it looks like an either or, I don't do anything. I wait until I know what to do next. So I function and teach out of awareness, not out of thoughts. I don't really have that many thoughts. Maybe a few hundred, but not thousands.
Well, you left Battle Creek.
I did.
And you came back. And what brought you back? Just at his home, or something deeper?
No one particular thing. It was a combination of things. One of my sons doesn't live too far away. Also, something about Battle Creek. Why would I go somewhere else? I was up in Minnesota for 10 years and thought about coming back here quite a bit. And eventually situation came around in such a way that I just came back here. And so it's almost like, I don't know, a word I sometimes use is choiceless, because things just start to happen, and I don't remember deciding that.
Yeah, I understand. Chiezan, you've been here 11 years, and we talked a little bit about what you've discovered about Battle Creek. It's a special place.
It is.
You.
It's unlike anywhere I've ever lived. It was a stark contrast moving from Grand Rapids to here, and as a young person, I was 23. It was a little bit difficult. I was looking for a lot more excitement, I think. As we've gotten more connected, though, I've just been really inspired by the community organizers and the different nonprofits that are really prioritizing the people. And there's so many grassroots efforts to support this community. And I feel that what we provide and what Sokuzan is teaching and we're endeavoring to provide in a more secular way at Karma House is an integral part of Battle Creek's wellness. So I think we have something unique to offer. And I feel really lucky to have connected with the library, with Stephanie Boyd down in the Teen Center. She has an incredible insight into working with people that it's not cut and dry. She really sees that every single day she has to see who shows up down there. And so she's been very flexible with our programming and seeing that some days certain things are just not going to work down there. But the presence is so important. The consistency of showing up for the community in some sense is almost more important than what we provide. So just particularly at that age, to just have somebody showing up consistently and just seeing, how are you doing? I love Battle Creek. I have a wife. She's an ordained monk and a student of Sokuzan's, and we have a son, and we're here. We'll be here for a while.
Yeah.
Maybe 40 or 50 more years.
I came here in 98, and I didn't expect to stay, honestly. It was a good job and a good opportunity, but I expected to move on, and just something about it really made it feel like home pretty quickly to me. And I think part of it is that it's a community that needs everybody. If I'm going to say this right, I can help. I feel like I can help. I feel like I'm part of something. I feel like I'm connected. It's big, but it's small. It's got an amazing history. So obviously I read a lot of its history, but I just think that there's been so many things of a spiritual nature that have really gravitated here. And maybe that's everywhere, but it certainly is here. So yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about the meditation. I'm no good at it. So, and all of this stuff, I can't being present. How do you over and you and Chiezan, you talked about it being not all that pleasurable at first for you. How do you overcome uh, the challenge of meditation? Because it's something a lot of people share. And by the way, this is sitting in this room. Your book, Chiezan, it's sitting. This room was used for meditation during the pandemic, when employees were working here, and we had this on the table for folks. So
I think it would be helpful. Sokuzan has those two books. That book, A Meditation Primer, includes 17 instructions, very simple 2-page instructions on how to meditate, and an expanded version, which I think there's a copy in the library, called 108 Meditation Instructions. So
yes.
I've enjoyed over the years just hearing Sokuzan give all hundreds and thousands of meditation instructions. So it might be helpful to have you say what meditation is as we practice it here, as opposed to what people might think meditation is.
No. So the Japanese word for the kind of meditation that's taught here is shikantaza, and the Tibetan word for a very similar thing is mahamudra or dzogchen. And so I've studied those different directions. And so basically it's just a matter of sit down, hold still, sit symmetrical, hold your back as straight as your personal back will allow you to do, and then find something where nothing is happening. It could be a wall, it could be your refrigerator, it could be a closet door, and have your senses open, all of your senses, your eyes, and just receive whatever's showing up in the 6 sense fields, including the mind. In other words, don't try to stop your thoughts. And by doing that very radical, simple, minimal approach to the mind stream, we approach the mind stream through that part of the mind that we have a say-so about, which is what? The body. You can't control the mind. I mean, you could do mantras or something like that, and that I could respond to questions about that, since I've literally done millions of mantras and counted them. So I have a little bit of authority in that area, perhaps. But the one that I teach is sit down, hold still, all the senses open, and the attitude is just observe or just receive. Whatever shows up in the mind, no matter how cranky or how delightful or how flat and beige color it is, just observe, just observe. And in this way, by doing it with the body, holding very still without being rigid, we eventually begin to see the nature of thoughts, the nature of, let's use the fancy word, of reality, ourselves. It is your spiritual path. It's not Buddhism is not, although it's treated like a belief system, it is not. The Buddha did not teach belief in anything. He taught the nature of the mind is run by the self-centeredness, the ego, and that is fueled by passion, aggression, and ignorance, or pushing, pulling, and shutting down. So it's a difficult process. It takes a lot of time. I think it's very necessary to have a teacher, but I'm very biased there. I had 2 teachers, and but everyone is so different.
Sure. Yeah. And well, I had a question in my mind, and now I lost it. I do, I think that the idea of just noticing is something that I get. We have some terrific yoga instructors, and I don't know if any of them teach at the Karma House, but Megan Lucci's is the one I'm thinking of right now.
Megan is starting a week from Thursday. She'll be teaching 6 p.m. at Karma House.
I've been going to her class at KCC too, but I go to the Y, and her and Robin Kerr and Kathy. But in any event, that idea of just noticing, it's hard for me. And I think that maybe it takes a more disciplined practice.
So let me help you a little bit with that, Michael. So the downside is it's hard for you. The upside is that's how it feels to do it. It's just like climbing a mountain. It's hard. Climb it anyway. That's why it's necessary to have a teacher who can say to you, who's been up and down the mountain, who is not separate from the mountain, who is the mountain, who no longer has a separate identity from you or anything else. This is the person, not me. I'm not promoting myself, but I'm just saying it's necessary to have a mentor, someone you can trust to ask questions of, that will not try to manipulate you, control you, or create some kind of cult atmosphere. There's no cult situation going on. If you're not, the idea is not to obey anybody, but listen to what they're saying.
another thing and I'm just speaking off the top of my head, so you can react to it. But the
Yeah.
other thing that kind of hits me is that, the discipline of being present all the time, and when you're meditating or trying to meditate, the challenge is to be there and not be somewhere else.
No.
No?
Let me interrupt you. If I
Okay,
may.
please do.
The discipline is to actually be aware that you can't be present, not to be present.
I see.
Being present, do you? Being present is a thought pattern, and where we convince ourselves that we're getting better, we're improving, and we're more and more present all the time. If you actually are present, you won't know it. If you know it, this is a relative knowledge, not ultimate knowledge or wisdom. Wisdom doesn't know anything but wisdom. Sorry for being so fancy on you here.
You're not being fancy. This is fascinating and intriguing. And I'm just going to throw up that slide again, because there's a few things, and I love this. I love the teaching. So we're going to let you teach a little bit. And these were just things that you had written. On the path of Buddhism is to help you leave Buddhism. Go ahead. You can explain that.
Well, it's like a raft to cross the river of suffering, or samsara, as it is said in Sanskrit. It's a path so you can actually leave the path, the structure. It's like a raft you take to cross a river. When you get to the other shore, you don't drag the raft around with you. But if you run into somebody who doesn't know which shore they're on, you might tell them how to build a raft, which means you might teach them about Buddhism or meditation with their permission. It's not about convincing anyone.
This is kind of what you just told me.
Yes. True practice is about the path. It's not about results. If it's about results, then we settle for some kind of a rest area, which feels pretty good, instead of continuing on the path on a spiritual path, which is a journey without end. If there's an ending, then we have a result, and that's the end of the spiritual path, for a while anyway, where you settle for some kind of relative truth or accomplishment. One who understands what this is will not be interested in anything other than serving others who are suffering. Did I say that?
Apparently you did. It's got your name on it.
Yeah, okay. Consciousness is completely formless unless it finds a form, and then it is upset. Same thing.
Same thing. Fair enough. So yeah, I just obviously I don't know a lot. Yeah, I feel like I'm learning a lot, and
Good.
this idea of presence to me is something that I've been really focused on, because I find my mind elsewhere all the time, and
Yes.
that's a challenge, because then you don't show up fully, and I think that's why I hit on presence as being part of what you were trying to do.
It is. Authentic presence is a teaching that my teacher and other teachers talk about. Authentic presence is there's presence, but there's no one who's present, and there's presence, but there's no otherness in the presence. It's just presence without a self, without another, transcending the self. That's what this is about.
Yeah. I put up on the screen meditation and services where folks can find it, and just to reemphasize, I mean, it might be intimidating for someone to walk in, right? So anybody's welcome, right?
Of course. Totally welcome, and as soon as we're working on getting a Buddha hall, a really large hall built where we can be more open to the public. Have a sign out in front where it's not just a monastery, but it's actually a public. I mean, people are welcome to come. It's just that we don't have a lot of space. So yes, people are welcome, certainly. And there is if I may say, on YouTube, if you type in SokukoJi or my name, there's close to 1,000, isn't there? Close to 1,000 actually hour and a half long talks where I'm teaching Buddhism, teaching the teachings of Buddhism. I have a lot to say about it. So having spent 33 years not saying too much, now I'm kind of hardly shut me up.
And yeah, you mentioned YouTube, and I wanted to say also that your services are on Zoom as well.
They are Zoom and
So there's
the
different ways to,
yes,
if you're curious, the door is open.
it is.
And I also wanted to put up, and if I take this down before anybody gets the chance to write it down, you can always watch it again on YouTube over and over and share it with all your friends or on Facebook. But this is the contact for Chiezan.
Or just keep it to yourself.
Keep it to yourself. You're very funny, you know that?
Yeah.
Well, it's been a pleasure.
Pleasure. Thank you.
And and we'll have you back too. I
Okay.
I'd love to see how this evolves.
We'll come back.
And I enjoyed getting to know you both, and enjoyed visiting you. And thank you again.
Yeah. And I just wanted to say that when you saw the three of us in front of the gate in the monastery, I meant to say that was my wife, Unyo. And she's also a fully ordained monk. And the last 45 minutes or half an hour, she's been in replacing me on another talk that I do every night at 6 p.m. on our Zoom channel. We've been doing that ever since COVID started. People are welcome to join that. It only takes about a half hour or so, and there's no fee or anything. People can just join. So anyway, I wanted to mention something about her.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't want to get in trouble.
Of course not. I have a lot of big questions, but it's been 45 minutes. We should let people get on. And thank you again. And just hang on while I end the broadcast for other folks. But thank you. Our next story is at Sundown. Will be in May. And I believe, I have a few guests that I'm juggling right now. But they're all interesting, right? They're all fantastic people. They're all Battle Creek people making a huge difference. So thank you again. And